Class, Chapter 3 talks about circumstances affecting criminal liability. So what are the circumstances affecting criminal liability? So these are the following. We have justifying. Please check the first table. Justifying, exempting, mitigating, aggravating, and alternative circumstances. So what is the effect? Ato pa dong sa kaning kuan. Second row. The effects sa justifying, exempting, mitigating, aggravating, and alternative circumstances are as follows. So, no wrong done sa justifying, hence there is no criminal liability. Nganong no wrong done man? Because ang iyaha nga action is in accordance with law. So, lawful ang gibuhat sa accused. For example, defending himself, that is considered lawful. Okay? So, exempting circumstances, this time, there is a wrong. So, naadjud siya criminal, meaning, nakabuhat jud siya og krimen. However, there is no criminal. Tungod kay naay lack of intelligence, lack of freedom, so dili siya voluntary ang iyang act mo na nga, while there is a wrong or there is a crime, there is no criminal. So, there is no criminal liability. So, refer ta sa second row ha, mitigating circumstances decreased ang iyang criminal liability. Aggravating, increased siya ang criminal liability. Alternative, it's either increased or decreased liability. As to the third row, refer to the third row. So, what is the effect as to the civil liability? So, sa justifying circumstance, tungod kay wala man siya wrong nga gibuhat, wala siya criminal liability. Therefore, wala pa siya civil liability except sa state of necessity. We will discuss this later on. So, exempting circumstances, there is a wrong, nga naman, kay naadjud krimen nga nabuhat. However, there is no criminal for lack of intelligence, lack of freedom. So, tungod kay naay wrong, naadjud siya civil liability except sa accident or insuperable cause. So, kaning accident and insuperable cause, wala po ni siya civil liability. So, again ha, as a general rule, exempting circumstances, no criminal liability. However, there is civil liability. Mitigating, aggravating, and alternative circumstances with civil liability ni silang tanan. Nga naman, kay na-adjudge siya felony or wrong done. Okay, so let's go to justifying circumstances. We have 6 justifying circumstances nga ang effect sa justifying circumstances, walay criminal liability. Okay, so 6 justifying circumstances. Number 1, self-defense, defense of strangers, relatives, defense of strangers, avoidance of a greater evil, fulfillment of duty, obedience to an order issued for some lawful purpose. So where do you find Article 1? Article 1 is fine. You can find Article 1 in Article justifying circumstances, rather, in Article 11 of the Revised Penal Code. So, sa Article 11, gi-enumerate ni diri tanan ang tanang justifying circumstances and the requisites which you must take notice of. So, dili siya dapat nga inyo ra hibawon kung unsang enumeration sa tanang justifying circumstances. Of course, there are requisites or requirements para mahimo siya nga valid nga defense, okay? So for example, we have self-defense. So anyone who acts in defense of his person or rights, provided that the following circumstances concur. So when you see a word concur, class, ang pasabot ana class is dapat magkuyog silang tanan, meaning dili pwede nga kung naay tulo ka requirements, dili pwede nga nay usa nga mawala. So dapat silang tanan magkuyog. So kung makakita mo aning word nga concur ha, meaning magkuyog silang tanan. Without one of that requirement, missing one of that requirement, dili na siya pwede nga matawag nga valid defense as justifying circumstance. Okay, so first, unlawful aggression. Second, reasonable necessity of the means employed to prevent or repel it or the aggression. Third, lack of sufficient provocation on the part of the person defending himself. Okay? So, sa second paragraph, naghisgot ni siya sa defense of relatives. So, who are the relatives nga itong gisgutan? Spouse or asawa, ascendants, descendants, o sa man ni ascendants kanang mosaka ka paibabaw. So kinsa may ascendant nimo imong amahan or imuhang lolo kay pasaka. Descendants imong anak or imong apo. Legitimate, natural, or adopted brothers or sisters. So you have to take note, class, nga ang brothers or sisters dapat naani siya ani nga description. Legitimate siya, brother or sister, natural brother or sister, or adopted brother or sister. Okay? Or of his relatives by affinity in the same degrees. Unsa man ning affinity? Meaning, dili necessarily sa blood, by blood. Okay? So, affinity meaning by virtue of kanang aloba nga naa na may relationship. For example, nagminyo. So, ang relatives by affinity nimo is ang katong imong mga in-laws. Okay? So, ang consanguinity, class, kani siya ang by blood mismo. Okay? Those by consanguinity within the fourth civil degree. So, ang computation sa civil degree, class, you will learn that later on. Kaya ako mo tudluan o saan pag-compute. Provided that the first and second requisites prescribed in the next preceding circumstance, meaning ang katong nag-una nga circumstance, kani siya, ang first two kuno ani niya, unlawful aggression, reasonable necessity of the means employed to prevent or repel the aggression, must be present. And further, ang third requisite aning sa second nga relative to defense of relatives, ang third requisite ani is in case the provocation was given by the person attacked, that the one making the defense had no part therein. Okay? Sa third paragraph, class, nag-refer ni siya sa defense of strangers. Okay? So, sa defense of strangers, class, first and second requisite gihapon sa self-defense, dapat present siya. Okay? So, by default, ni siya, class, nga katong na atong unlawful aggression, o second, reasonable necessity of the means employed to repel the aggression. So, ang third requisite ra, ang nagdaog or baylo-baylo or nagka-change sa tulo ka circumstances. Sa first three circumstances, sa self-defense, sa defense of relatives, and defense of strangers. We will discuss the details later. Okay, sa fourth, any person who in order to avoid an evil or injury does an act with which causes damage to another, provided the following requisites are present. So, dapat magkuyog ra gyapon ni sila. Kani silang tulo. Ikalima, any person who acts in the fulfillment of a duty or in the lawful exercise of a right or office. Ikaunom, any person who acts in obedience to an order issued by a superior for some lawful purpose. Okay, I'm sorry, class, for my raspy voice tungod kay ning attack ang ako ang sinusitis. That's why I was not present yesterday. Okay, di ko katingog. Okay, so let's go to the definition of justifying circumstances. Justifying circumstances, class, those where the act of a person is said to be in accordance with law, so that such person is deemed not to have transgressed the law and is free from both civil and criminal liability. There is no civil liability, as mentioned a while ago. As a general rule, walay civil liability except sa paragraph 4, which is state of necessity, where the civil liability is borne by the persons benefited by the act. So, what is the basis of justifying circumstances? Ngano nga dili wala may criminal liability? The basis of it is lack of criminal intent. Okay? So, let's go to the details one by one sa anini ang mga kuan kan justifying circumstances. Number 1, we have self-defense. So, self-defense includes not only the defense of person or body of the one assaulted, but also of his rights, the enjoyment of which is protected by law. So, it includes the defense of honor, the defense of property. Okay? So kung sagpaon ka dire, defense of honor, kung sagpaon ka, slap on the face is considered as unlawful aggression. So since the face represents a person and his dignity, so kung sagpaon ka in public, pwede ka nga maka-claim og self-defense kung nakakuan ka, naka-repel ka niya. Pero pwede ba nga tungod kay gisagpa ka imong patyon? Dili. Kay nga no, naman tay second requisite baya sa ato ang self-defense nga reasonable necessity of the means to repel the aggression. So kung ang aggression niya class sa lain nga person is slap or pagsagpa, so unsa man ang reasonable means or necessity? Pwede siguro imo siya matukmod or pwede imo siya nga mapasakitan physically nga aron i-repel nimo ang pagsagpa. However, dili pwedeng imo patyon. Ha, kay naman siya ang second requisite. Number 2, covered gapon siya sa self-defense class ang defense of property rights. It can be invoked if there is an attack upon the property, although it is not coupled with an attack upon the person of the owner of the premises. All the elements for justifying circumstances must, however, be present. So, first, sa itong mga elements or requisites for self-defense to be a valid defense, you call it URL. O something U, unlawful aggression. R, reasonable necessity of the means employed to prevent or repel it. Kani si it ha, si aggression ni ha. And L, lack of sufficient provocation on the part of the person defending himself. So kung ikaw ang ning defend sa imuhang kaugalingon, dapat wala po kaning provoke. Kay kung nag-una, ang third requisite ng good class is dapat may lack of sufficient provocation on the part of you defending yourself. So, kung naa kay provocation in the first place, unya mo po'y nakaangin nga naay unlawful aggression sa person nga imong gi-provoke, then you cannot claim a valid self-defense. Okay? So, let's go to the first element, unlawful aggression. This is equivalent to an actual physical assault. Okay? Unlawful aggression class is an actual physical assault or a threatened assault, immediate and imminent kind, which is offensive and positively strong, showing the wrongful intent to cause harm. So, unlawful aggression class refers to both actual physical assault and second, threatened assault nga dapat immediate siya or imminent. Okay? So, may pasabot og immediate. Meaning, dili siya, for example, gi-threat kintahay ka karon, nakitay mo, nakita kitay mo sa imuhang kontra sa merkado. Gingnan kaniya nga, ako kang patyon, huwata lang ko kay patyon ka na ako karon. So, immediately thereafter ning gawa siya, nagdaan na siya sa iyang hinagiban or sa iyang armalite. Okay? So, threatened siya. Threatened assault siya. However, immediate and imminent siya. Dapat, dili siya pwede nga sa sunod simana pa siya ang iyahang kanang pag-perform sa iyang threat of unlawful aggression. Kay nga naman, kung nilabay na siya nga, nadugayan na siya, di na siya gitawag og unlawful aggression. So, mamising na mao nga element. So, kung imo siyang patyon, unya, dili imminent or immediate ang iyang threat, then, dili lawful ang imuhang pag-claim sa self-defense. Okay? So, must come, the unlawful aggression class, you have to take note that it must come from the person attacked by the accused. Okay, so for example, in this example, ang laki ani class, mao siya ang unlawful aggressor, okay? Si babay, mao siya ang kanang accused. Ngano siya man ang accused? Of course, siya man ang mo defense sa iyang kagalingon. Siya ang either nakapatay or nakaharm sa iyang unlawful aggressor. So, ang victim ani ni ang sitwasyon na si unlawful aggressor, siya ang mamatay ani nga sitwasyon na sa self-defense. Okay? The aggression must constitute a violation of law. So, sa may mga example of violation of law, kana na ang ingon ani. Physical kuan man ni siya. Physical injury man ni siya or iyahang kanang gi-assault ang kanini ang ato ang person claiming self-defense. Unlawful aggression must be a continuing circumstances or must have been existing at the time the defense is made. So, ang perfect na example mo gud ni class kung ikaw kintahay class, nakitahay ning attack nimo, nagdala kintahay siya og bolo, i-attack ka niya. Pero kung imo gali siyang hanan class to repel the aggression, imo kita nagdagan siya paingon nimo, nagdala sa bolo nya, ikaw nagdala pug ka og bat, baseball bat, unya imo siyang imo siyang gisuklan, unya ning dagan gali na imong unlawful aggressor class, naputol ang iyahang unlawful aggression. So, you have to remember nga sa paragraph 1 nga self-defense, kaning requirement, paragraph 1, 2, and 3 has self-defense, defense of relatives, or defense of strangers, kaning unlawful aggression, dapat continuing siya nga circumstances. Nga naman, kung ang aggression man good class cease to exist, there is no longer a necessity to defend oneself. Okay? So, kung, for example, kato akong gihimo nga example kanina, gagihanan siya, o nagdagan siya, paingon nimo mo attack siya, nagdalag bolo, unya imong gidalhan kita baseball bat, kay imo pud siyang i-repel. So, kana na ang iyahang nga pag-atras, for example, class, kanang iyahang nga pagdagan kita, pagkakita nimo nga nagdala na po kag baseball bat, kana ning cease na ang iyahang unlawful aggression. So, kung imo jud gihapon siyang gukdon, para imong bunalan o patyon pinaagi sa imong baseball bat, then you cannot claim self-defense. Okay? What is the exception? Kanus man ang exception nga pwede nga dili continuing ang unlawful aggression. Ang exception ni class is when the aggressor retreats, ning retreat ang aggressor. However, ang iyahang nga purpose sa pag-retreat sa aggressor is to obtain more advantageous position to ensure the success of the initial attack. Unlawful aggression is deemed to continue. So, for example, ning atras siya, pero pag atras diyan, nagkuha depod siya og armalite para mo ensure siya sa iyang advantageous position. So, kananaa siya deemed to continue gihapon ang iyang unlawful aggression. Pero kung ningdagan siya, tungod kay nidagan na dun siya kay gusto niyang nahadlok siya iyang i-save iyang kaugalingon. So kana ning cease na ang iyahang unlawful aggression. Okay? So there is no unlawful aggression class when there was an agreement to fight and the challenge to fight was accepted. But aggression which is ahead of an agreed time or place is unlawful aggressions. For example, kamo kintahay mga batan-on kay hilig man jud mo ningon ana nag-ilog mo og kanang hinigugma na usa ka person nga inyong hinigugma nya tungod kay perti na jud ninyong gugma, nag-away mo ani imuhang karibal. So nagsabot mo nga magkana sinumbagay. So kana class wala na gitawag unlawful aggression. Ngano man agreement man mo to fight. Pero there is unlawful aggression class kung naiusa sa inyong panagsabot kintahay, nagsabot mo nga alas 10 ha, sa buntag magkita ta dire mo nimo na. Pero ning attack siya ahead of time. So sa gabi pa lang before sa D-day ninyo nga mag-away mo o sinumbagay mo, gi-assault kaniya. So there is an unlawful aggression if made ahead of an agreed time or place. Okay? So, what is the rule? Excuse me. What is the rule sa self-defense class? The self-defense class, the rule in self-defense is stand ground when in the right. Okay? Unsa may pasabot ani? The law does not require a person to retreat when his assailant is rapidly advancing upon him with a deadly weapon. So, the reason for the rule is that one flees from an aggressor, he runs the risk of being attacked in the back of the aggressor. So, ang kuan jud ani class, ang ato ang rules sa self-defense class is stand ground when in the right. Okay? So, kung naa kay katungod, stand ground. So, mo na nga pwede ka nga mo attack back kung naa kay unlawful aggressor. Dili ang reason sa law ngano nga mo ni ang right class, mo ni siya ang rule tungod kay kung mudagan magug ka kung na kay unlawful aggressor, you run the risk of being attacked sa imong likod. So mo ni siya ang rule jud sa self-defense. Mo na siya nga nahimo siyang excuse or nahimo siya nga kanang nahimo siyang justifying circumstance nga mawad-an ka og criminal liability tungod ani nga mao nga rule nga stand ground when in the right. So pwede ka nga mo patay kung ikaw patyon pug ka. Mao nay pasabot ang stand ground when when in the right. Okay? What is the second element? The second element is the reasonable necessity of the means employed to prevent or repel it or the aggression. Okay. What is the test of reasonableness, class? So, ang test sa reasonableness class, the means employed depends upon the following: nature and quality of the weapon used by the aggressor. So, for example, nagdala siya sniper nimo para iyara di kang kusion sa imong bugan. Ang ahang mapug imong gamitan og 45. Okay? Number 2, aggressor's physical condition, character, size, and other circumstances. O for example, ang imuha kitay aggressor class is babae, nga gamay, sama ni ma'am, inyong maestra. So, imo de pong gamitan o kaning kuan, ang imuhang necessity to repel it, imong gamitan agad-agad, imong bombahan, si ma'am. So, mo na siya class ang test of reasonableness. Those of the person defending himself and place and occasion of the assault. Okay? So, ang test of reasonableness class na kinahanglan dyan na siya analysis pod class. Meaning, inyuhan na ng utok ba? So, when you are given a problem class sa ato ang exam, analyze sa intawon po ninyo class. Oy, unsa gigamit sa unlawful aggressor. So, kung ang aggressor ninyo, sa ako ang exam, naggamit siya og 45, then malamang ang dapat nimong gamiton to repel the aggression is 45 sad, or at the very least 45 or armalite. Okay? Pero kung ang aggressor nimo nagamit ra siya og dagom, ang ama po imong gamitan og kaning kanini ang 45, mao na siya ang second element class nga reasonable necessity of the means employed to prevent or repel the aggression. So you have to remember that test of reasonableness requires your analysis of the facts of the problem. Okay. The third element class is, third ni siya class ha, sayop ning nadere. Third element is lack of sufficient provocation on the part of the defender. Okay, so let's go back to our illustration here. So, di ba si man mo ay unlawful aggressor, si woman ang person or the defender, the person defending themselves or claiming self-defense, herself. Okay, siya ang posibleng nakapatay ani nga laki. So, unsa may pasabot aning lack of sufficient provocation on the part of the defender class? Okay? So, ang lack of sufficient provocation, mo ni siya ang illustration nato. So, number 1, meaning, ang nag-una jud sa kanang unlawful aggression, walay kuan class, murabag walay nag-una nga action, kundi ang unlawful aggression ra jud. Okay? Sa person, sa man to woman, unsa man ang iyahang kinsa si man to woman sa participation nato ani ni ang ato ang illustration. Si man, mao ni siya ang deceased ha, mao ni siya ang aggressor. For example, mao ni siya ang kaning namatay kintahay or na harm sa person nga sa defender. Okay? So, si man to woman, man to woman, iyang gibuhat unlawful aggression. Unsa man ang iyang unlawful aggression? Kani, iyang gituok. Okay? Mao ni ang unlawful aggression. So, si woman to man, meaning si woman, mao man ni siyang accused, ani ni ang kanang self-defense. Kay siya man ang defender, siya man ang ning-claim sa self-defense. So, for example, si woman to man, iya kitayong giluba ang kanini ang man. So, namatay si man. So, mao ni siya ang accused. So, ang reasonable necessity of the means employed to prevent the aggression is kaning kuan, present and reasonable. Nga naman, magkinahanglan pa kag analyze class kung gituok na ka, kung unsa imong gamito. So, kung gituok na ka, mura na kagkamatayon, unya na kay magunitan nga kutsilyo din niya, imong lubaon, namatay imong aggressor, then you are excused or you are justified. So, ang effect ana is no criminal liability. Nga naman, ang nag-una jud, nag-initiate ana tanan is katong namatay kani si man. Siya ang unlawful aggressor. Okay? So, unsa man pod ang effect kung si woman jud ang nag-una, meaning naa siya sufficient provocation. Unsa may mga example og sufficient provocation. So for example, kitahay si kuan kintahay, si woman kintahay before ni nagtinuokay sila, si woman kitahay ni kay nakit-an ni man ba nag-asawa kitahay ni sila. Si woman before siya gituok nakit-an siya ni man nga nagkiskis sa usa ka lain nga laki. So for example, na siya gikisan nga lain nga laki, nasakpan sa iyang bana. So gituok siya. Mao na gitawag og sufficient provocation. Okay? So, tungod kay na sufficient provocation, mao tong na-ignite ang passion ni man, mao nang naghimo siya unlawful aggression. Okay? So kung nag-initiate gali ani tanan or ang kuan ba ang overt act which kaning triggered everything is a sufficient provocation, is the sufficient provocation of the defender or the person defending himself, then the effect is wala siya justifying circumstance. So dili siya valid defense class. So si woman this time, the accused, mo incur na siya og criminal liability. Ngano man tungod kay this time ang good class, wala niya ma-comply ang third requisite. What is the third requisite? Dapat dapat zero ang sufficient provocation on the part of the defender. So, kung siya gali nag-una class, nag-ignite para mag-create og unlawful aggression ang imuhang aggressor, then wala kay claim of self-defense. So, should you kill your unlawful aggressor class, should you kill the person, you cannot claim justifying circumstance of self-defense, okay? You incur criminal liability. So, check the effect ha, diri dapita sa last nga column. Illustration 3. What if the man to woman or unlawful aggressor, siya ang ning-provoke, okay? Ning-provoke siya class. Unya, si defender, si woman, iyaha nga gi-attack to repel the provocation. What is the effect? The effect class is you are still criminally liable. It is not a justifying circumstance. Nganong dili man siya justifying circumstance class? Because class, ang aggressor gali class or katong person nga nabiktima, dapat ihang buhaton is unlawful aggression. You cannot kung provocation lang siya class, unlawful aggression is specific. You cannot do away with unlawful aggression sa self-defense. Kani si URL class, si U o si R class, kuan ni siya, kanini ang requirement ni siya sa defense sa self-defense, defense of relatives, defense of strangers, si unlawful aggression o reasonable necessity of the means employed it. So, si unlawful aggression, mo ni siya ang pinaka-importante sa tulo ka justifying circumstances. Okay? So, kung provocation ra gani ang gibuhat sa imuhang attacker or sa person assaulting you, class, dili na siya kaning pwede nga matawag nga self-defense. Kung imong girepel kitay ang provocation, unya imo siyang napatay, dili siya self-defense. Again, class, you have to remember the three elements: unlawful aggression, reasonable necessity of the means employed it, and lack of sufficient provocation on the part of the person defending himself. Okay? So you already know unsa ni unlawful aggression. Unsa man to atong gidiscuss ganina, unlawful aggression refers to actual physical assault or physical harm unya or threatened physical assault or physical harm, pero dapat immediate siya and imminent. Ang provocation mga good class is a lesser kanang kuan kind of animal. Provocation is pwede ra siya nga istorya-istorya lang. Okay? Pwede nga istorya-istorya lang or pagbuli-buli lang. That is a mere provocation. Pero unlawful aggression is a different kind of kaning kuan class. Different kind of kaning kuan ba concept nga kinahang nga defined jud siya sa balaod nga dapat dili ninyo ma-confuse sa provocation. Okay? So, you have to remember the important rules. Kani akong gi-orange. Important rules on lack of sufficient provocation. Okay? Again, kani akong gi-istorya ganina. Never confuse unlawful aggression with provocation. Kani akong gi-istorya ganina lang. Kani akong gihimong example. Mere provocation is not enough. It must be real and imminent. Okay? Unlawful aggression is an indispensable requirement sa kanini ang self-defense. If there is unlawful aggression but one of the requisite is lacking, it is considered incomplete self-defense. Okay? So again class, kani si URL class, sa tuloan ni, ang unlawful aggression ang dili pwedeng mawala. Okay? So, general rule, for you to claim self-defense, dapat kompleto dyan ni silang tulo. Si U, R, L. Para makaklaim kag self-defense. However, kung naay missing nga usaa na, pwede siyang matawag nga incomplete self-defense nga mahimo siyang mitigating circumstance. You will learn that in your paragraph 1, article 13. Incomplete self-defense class meaning makuhaan og at least makuhag usa ka requirement sa self-defense. Okay? Pero dili pwede ang makuhaan na ang mao nga requirements is katong you si unlawful aggression. Unlawful aggression must be present at all times. Okay? It's either si R ra o si L ang pwedeng mawala para matawag siyang incomplete self-defense nga mahimo siyang mitigating circumstance. Okay? So you will learn that later. Retaliation is different from act of self-defense class ha. Retaliation means pagpanimaos. Okay? So it is not anymore self-defense. Nga naman, again, kato inyo i-remember tong ako ang kaning rule ganina nga naadyo siya dapat requirement nga continuing ang aggression. Kung dili nagali continuing ang aggression, ni atras nagali ng imong attacker, ning uli na siya sa ilahang bay, ning kaunog lugaw, na imo pa dyan siyang giapas para lang dyan imong patyon. O that's retaliation. You cannot, class, you cannot do that in self-defense. Okay? So, self-defense class also covers, again, kato akong gi-mention ganina, defense of honor. Second, pwede siya nga defense of property. Pero you have to remember class nga, in defense of property class, it can only be invoked as justifying circumstance if the life and limb of the person making the defense is also the subject of unlawful aggression. Life cannot be equal to property. Okay? So, for example, class, ang kanabitang nakitay threaten kitahay nga threatened nga kanang pagpangilog kitay sa imong property niya. Part sa iyang pagpangilog sa imong property kay iya pong gihimo nga naapoy threat sa imong nga person or sa life nimo. So, you consider that as unlawful aggression. Ngano man class, in People versus Apolinar, niingon si Supreme Court nga, ang defense of property, para matawag nimo siya, maklaim nimo siya as part of self-defense, dapat coupled dyan na siya o ganang threat sa life and limb sa person defending himself. Okay? Dili siya purely property lang ang iyang i-defend. Okay? So, again ha, balikon to na dapat dito ninyo kalimtan. Kaya inyo tong kalimtan, ma-part pa na sa exam na, mapaksit yun mo class. Okay, na paragraph 2 sa ato ang justifying circumstance. Defense of relatives. Sa defense of relatives class, again, naadjud gihapon ng unlawful aggression, naagihapon ng reasonable necessity of the means employed to prevent it. Mora ni siya ang nagkalahi. So, unsa man third nga requisite. In case the provocation was given by the person attacked, the one making the defense had no part therein. Okay? So, dapat kaning wala pod ang person nga ning tabang. Kitay for example, tulo na ni ka persons ang involved ani class. Imagine ha, si attacker, for example ha, katong laki, attacker, si babay, si kanang person nga gi-attack, katong wife niya, ibutang nato ang ning defend sa iyahang iyahang sa babae is ang iyang anak. So for example, relative man mo na ni siya, defense of relative, meaning defense sa anak sa iyang inahan. So ang requirement ani nga third requirement ani ni ang defense of relative class. If in case manggali ang babay ang ning provoke by the person attack, dapat the person making the defense or ang iyang anak must had no part therein, meaning wala jud siya part sa pag-provoke sa unlawful, sa imuhang unlawful aggressor. Okay? So dapat wala siya kalabutan sa pag-provoke. Do you remember the third requisite sa kanini ang self-defense nga dapat lack of sufficient provocation on the part of the person defending himself. So siya man ang defense sa iyang kaugalingon, so dapat siya mismo wala siya mo provoke. Pero this time, kung siya ang gi-defend sa defense of relative, siya ang gi-defend kintahay sa iyang anak, so ang iyang anak dapat di wala siya kalabutan. Kung for example, ang iya kitang inahan mo'y nag-provoke jud sa iyang amahan para i-assault siya, dapat ang anak nga nag-defend sa iyang inahan, dili jud siya wa siya kalabutan sa provocation. Okay? So, unsa may basis nga no nga excused man ang kani nga person nga makapatay in defense of his relatives. Ang basis ani is humanitarian sentiment, impulse of blood, which impels men to rush on the occasion of great perils to rescue of those close to them by ties of blood. So you have to remember class, sa diri sa defense of relatives, specific kaayo ni siya class ha, kung kinsa ning relatives nga pwede nimong ma-defend. Okay? Kinsa man ni, aron ma-excuse ka. So kinsa man ni sila? So first, si spouse. Unsa man ning spouse? Imong asawa. Na may gitawag og illegitimate spouse or kabit? Wala. So spouse meaning legitimate ha, meaning lawful spouse. Number 2, ascendants. Kinsa man ni say ascendants? Again, katong pinasaka, pasaka, pagkwinta nimo, imong amahan, imong lolo. Descendants, paubos, imong anak or imong mga apo. Legitimate, natural, or adopted brothers or sisters. Okay? You have to remember class, specific kaayo ang balaod. Legitimate, natural, or adopted brothers or sisters. Pwede ba nga mo defend ka sa illegitimate brother or sister nimo? Dili. Ngano man, specific ang balaod nga legitimate, natural, adopted. Okay? Relatives by affinity in the same degree. Again, kaning affinity by law ni siya ang inyong relationship. So, unsa man ni mga by law? Kani imong mother-in-law, imong father-in-law. Okay? So, ang atuang nga kuan ani class, ang atuang nga kaning code ani class is sadback. Ngano man sadback? S, spouse. A, ascendants. D, descendants. B, brothers. Legitimate, natural, or adopted brothers or sisters. A, affinity. C, consanguinity. Unsa may consanguinity? By blood ang inyong relationship. Okay? Pero naa siya requirement up to 4th civil degree. So, how do you know kung kinsa man ning 4th civil degree? Okay. Ascendants class ha, ikaw, kaning circle class, kaning si number 1, for example, ikaw. So, kung ikaw kintahay ang mo defend sa imuhang nga relatives, dapat magkuan ka, careful ka, kay for you to claim justifying circumstance of defense of relatives, dapat ikaw mismo kahibaw ka nga covered siya sa enumeration sa balaod nga relatives. Kay kung dili gali covered ani nga enumeration sa relatives class, you cannot claim that. Or at least you can claim siguro defense of strangers sa katong third paragraph. Okay? So, sa defense of relatives, ascendants, again, ikaw ning 1 ha, ang ascendants imong pasaka, meaning imong amahan or imong lolo. Kaning collateral class, kaning imuhang collateral relatives class is kaning imuhang nga mga kuan, imuhang nga mga igsuon. Mo na siya collateral. Okay? Ang descendants class imong anak or imong apo, paubos siya. So unsa may pasabot of first degree cousin, kaning layman gali nga term na to class. Ang first degree cousin class, mao ni siya ang balaod nga 4th civil degree. Ang kwinta sa balaod manggod class is dili ning kaning first degree, second degree cousin class, layman na siya nato nga kaning kuan, layman nga computation. Pero ang computation sa balaod class is fourth na dyan na siya. Ang kaning first cousin nato is fourth civil degree of consanguinity na ni siya. So unsa man ay pagkwenta? So ikaw ang person defending your relative. Ang imong pagkwenta na class is 1, pasaka ka imong papa. Kuan ka, pakilid ka sa imong uncle. Pa-down ka sa imong cousin. So mo na nga fourth civil degree siya. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? So mo na pagkwenta sa degree class. Musaka jud ka sa imuhang origin. Kinsa man ang origin nimo? Malamang imong amahan. Okay? So, mo na siya class ang pag-compute sa degree. So, kinsa ramaday ang covered aning relatives by consanguinity, by blood, within the fourth civil degree. So, ang kuto brajud ani class is ang imuha nga first degree cousin. At the very least, ang imong gi-defend is ang imong first degree cousin within the fourth civil degree, para makaklaim ka sa defense of relatives. Pwede ba nga mo-claim ka nga defense of relatives kung anak na, imuha ng pag-umangkon, ibutang na to anak na sa imong cousin? Butang na to, napani siya'y sumpay. Nga kuan, kanang for example, kintahay, na ni siya'y sumpay kitay dire, nga anak pa. So, kung anak pa sa imong cousin ang imuha nga idipinsa class, dili na siya fourth civil degree. So, at the very least, ang matawag na nimo ana, pwede na siya nga defense of strangers. Nga naman, dili naman siya relative. Kay ika-fifth naman ni siya. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 na. Ika-5 na ni siya. Okay? Kaning anak sa imuha nga cousin. So, dili na siya covered sa relatives by consanguinity within the fourth civil degree. So, you have to remember class ha, unsa ang meaning ani nga relatives by law para makaklaim ka sa defense of relatives. Okay. Let's go to defense of strangers. Again, naara jud gihapon ni unlawful aggression, reasonable necessity of the means employed to repel it. Diri ra jud ta nagdaog sa third requisite. Unsa man ang third element? The person defending was not induced by revenge, resentment, or other evil motive. Of course, ang mampod imo ra claim ra kintahay pasimangil-sumangil kitay ka nga dili nag-defend ko sa stranger kato akong kaila. Pero in truth and in fact di ay na di kay dumot aning person nga attacker adto nga mao nga stranger. Imong gipahimuslan ba nga, hoy, nay nag-attack sa katotoang amo ang silingan nga stranger. So, tungod kay nalagot ka kay kamo ni nga person ang kanang uyab sa imuhang ex, so imong lang kitay pong gipahimuslan, imong gipatay tungod ay pos imong kalagot. So, na kay resentment or revenge ato nga person. So, for you to be able to kanang claim the defense of strangers as kanang justifying circumstance, dapat wala ni siya, wala ning ikatulo. Dapat ning comply ka aning ikatulo nga requisite. Okay? Okay, class. So, stranger class. O sa may stranger, any person not included in the enumeration of relatives. So, mo to akong gimension ganina. So, again, if the person being defended is a second cousin, kato, defense of stranger na siya. Nga naman, fourth civil degree na siya kutob of consanguinity. Okay? So, unsa may basis aning defense of stranger? Basis nga ngano nga kanang ma-justify man ang person nganong wala may criminal liability. The basis of which is what one may do in his defense, another may do for him. Sad. So, the ordinary man would not stand idly by and see his companion killed without attempting to save his life. Of course, kuan man siya, human nature man jud po na nga ato pong i-defend ang atong isigkataw. So, unsa man ang ika-fourth kanang justifying circumstance. So, avoidance of a greater evil sought. Okay? So, unsa man ang elements? Evil sought to be avoided actually exists. So, dapat actual ang naa jud nga kanang katong imuha nga gi-avoid nga evil. Okay? The evil or injury sought to be avoided must not have been produced by the one invoking the justifying circumstance. O malamang ikaw kintahay ang nag-cause ra pod sa evil, so dili ka ka-claim ana. So ang evil must actually exist, must come from others, dili gikan nimo mismo. Okay? Second element, injury feared be greater than that done to avoid it. So, for example, ikaw kintahay ang ikaw kintahay ang nakahimo og sala. So, for you to claim avoidance of greater evil, meaning dili ikaw ang nag-cause sa evil. Dili ikaw ang nagkuan ba kanang naka-trigger mao nang nahitabo ng mao nga evil nga imong gi-avoid. Okay? Unya, dapat ang katong evil nga imong gi-avoid, dapat dako jud siya or great siya in such a way nga kanang imong gikahadlukan nga injury, dapat dako siya, meaning mamatay na jud ka. Than that done to avoid it. So, for example, kanang imuha kintahay nga gibuhat to avoid the injury, mas gamay siya kaysa imong gikahadlukan nga evil. Mo na siya, class. Okay? So third, there is no other practical and less harmful means of preventing it. So walay lain nga means or practical or less harmful way of preventing the evil nga imong gikahadlukan. Okay? So general rule, wala jud siya civil liability in this justifying circumstance because there is no crime. Okay? Pero the exception, again unjustifying circumstance, no crime. So, consider, because there is no crime, wala jud siya criminal liability. Ang tungod ana nga wala may crime, wala po siya civil liability. Pero exception ni siya, class, ang avoidance of greater evil. Here, there is civil liability under this paragraph. The persons benefited shall be liable in proportion to the benefit which they have received. Okay. Case in point. Naghisgotay ni siya sa BP bilang 22. Sa maning BP bilang 22 kana anti-bouncing checks law. So, ang story ani, class, nag-issue siya og bouncing check for hospital bills. Okay, unsa may story ani? This happened sometime in 2004, T versus People. So, T's mother and sister were confined at Manila Doctors Hospital. So, T signed the acknowledgement of responsibility for payment sa contract of admission. So, ang total hospital bill nila, class, is ang nagtatagingting na 1 million plus. So, ning-execute si T o promissory note where she assume payment of the obligation in installments. To assure payment sa obligation, nag-issue siya og 7 ka post-dated checks against Metrobank payable to the hospital. Okay? Nag-issue siya check paingon dito sa hospital para kintahay iyang ma-assume ang katong as proof ba to support his promissory note. Okay? So, ilahang pag-withdraw pa, pag-in-cash pa ni hospital sa 7 ka post-dated check, gi-dishonor siya sa bangko, sa Metrobank. Ngano man, kay wala siya, insufficient ang insufficient ang funds nga gihatag dito ni T. Iyang gi-deposit dito. So, as defense, so gifailan siya kaso si T nga sa violation of BP 22 or the bouncing checks law. Okay? So, ang defense ni T nga gi-issue ra mo kuno siya sa check because of uncontrollable fear of greater injury. She averred iyang allegation nga she was forced to issue the check to obtain release of her mother who was being inhumanly treated sa hospital. She alleged nga her mother kuno has contemplated suicide. So, mo ni siya ang fear niya. Mo ni ang gitawag kuno niya, consider niya nga greater injury or evil nga iyahang sought to be avoided. Mo na nga iya kunong gibuhat, ning issue na lang kuno siya check. Okay? So, sa lower court, ningon ang lower court, guilty ka, oy, dili maayo, dili kanang kuan, dili dili siya kanini ang valid imong defense sa kuan kanini ang avoidance of greater evil ang imuhang gibuhat so unsa may gibuhat sa unsa may kanang kuan kan decision sa lower court. Ang decision niya class is gikuan jud siya found guilty. So gi-raise siya, gi-apilar siya sa kanang Court of Appeals hangtod ni abot siya sa Supreme Court. Si Supreme Court unsa man ang ruling. Okay? Si Supreme Court held that the court sustained the findings of the unsa may pasabot og sustained class. Gi-sustain kuno sa court ang findings sa lower court. Unsay pasabot og sustained class? Ang pasabot sa sustained is meaning iyaha nga gi support or gipadayon. Gi-affirm niya ang findings sa lower court. Niingon si Supreme Court, the evil sought to be avoided is merely expected or anticipated. Iharabang kuan ba? Murabag fear of the unknown. Wa pagali siya kahibaw, expected and anticipated na siya. So the defense of an uncontrollable fear of a greater injury is not applicable. They could have taken advantage of an available option to avoid committing a crime. By her own admission, admit siya nga she had the choice to give jewelry. Pwede man siya magsangla baya security instead of post-dated checks. Diba? Na siya third requisite, there is no other practical or less harmful means of preventing it. Nabe siya laing practical means to prevent the kanang kuan katong iyang gikadlukan nga injury. Unsa man, pwede man niya masangla ang iyang kuan, ang iyang na may less harmful means of doing it. Dili lang siya mag-issue post-dated check. Pwede ba niya isang laia mga alahas, di ba? So, wala gyapon siya makakomply sa third requisite. So, by her own admission, she had the choice to give jewelry or other forms of security instead of post-dated checks to secure her obligation. So, the greater, for the defense of state of necessity to be availing, the greater injury feared should not have been brought about by the negligence or imprudence, more so the willful inaction of the person defending, claiming these justifying circumstances. Okay? So in this case, the issuance of the bounce check was brought about by T's own failure to pay her mother's hospital bills. Okay, so last, the fifth justifying circumstance is fulfillment of duty or lawful exercise of right or office. So, unsa man mga elements ani? Elements, offender acted in performance of duty or lawful exercise of right or office. Number 2, the injury caused or the offense committed be the necessary consequence of the due performance of duty or the lawful exercise of such right or office. Okay? If the first condition is present, class, but the second is not, the offender you can claim this as privilege mitigating circumstance. Okay? So, duha ra man ni sila ka kuan class, duha ra man ni sila ka elements. So, again, nainumdum mo sa ako ang gi-mention last time nga sa Article 13 natay gitawag og incomplete defense justifying circumstances nga pwede na to matawag nga mitigating circumstance. Mao ni siya. So, kung naiusa ani nila nga mawagtang, pwede siya nga matawag nga mitigating circumstance. Okay, so unsa man ni nga kaso, People versus ULEP. Okay, kani si People versus ULEP class, kuan ni siya class, ana sila gigukod nga kuan, sila gigukod nga kaning person running amok, unsa may pasabot o running amok kan bang murag nag kuan siya baka na violent na siya nga tao. So, the victim threatened the safety of the police officers. Kuan man siya na naka-iskapo nga nag-wild. So, Nag-warning shot ning mga kaning police officers. Napoy verbal admonition to the victim to lay down in his weapon. Nagdala man siya weapon. So unsa man ang Supreme Court ruling ani? As a police officer, it is to be expected that accused appellant would stand his ground, diba? Stand ground when in right. Always remember that. Up to that point, his decision to respond with a barrage of gunfire to halt the victim's further advance was justified under the circumstances. A police officer is not required to afford the victim the opportunity to fight back. Of course, kung naakay kung gi-attack ka, ay no, paghuwat nga kanini ang kuan, kanang mapatay ka sa imuha nga assailant, di ba? But, always remember class, he cannot be exonerated from overdoing his duty when he fatally shot the victim in the head, even after the latter slumped to the ground due to multiple gunshot. So, si Ulip manggod class, iyang gibuhat, nagpadong na, advancing kaniya ang iyang attacker, katong nag-running amok, katong nagdag weapon. Advancing niya, iyang gipusil sa body. Pagpusil sa body, nahagba na magod iyang assailant, iya pa man siyang gipusil sa o. Okay? So, dili pwede class, dili pwede nga maklaim nimo siya diri sa fulfillment of duty or lawful exercise of right or office. Okay? So, unsa man ang giingon sa balaod? The victim at that point, ingon si Supreme Court no longer posed a threat. Shooting him in the head was obviously unnecessary. The law does not clothe police officers with authority to arbitrarily judge the necessity to kill. It must be stressed that their judgment and discretion as police officers in the performance of their duties must be exercised neither capriciously or oppressively, but within reasonable limits. Okay, remember that class ha, kay basig mo claim mo aning ay pwede man mo claim mo paragraph justifying circumstance fulfillment of duty or lawful exercise of right or office. Lawful exercise kung inyong gipatay unya ning kuana na siya ning surrender na, dili na siya pwede class ha. So always remember that being police officers. So paragraph 6, ang last na to nga kanang justifying circumstances, obedience to unlawful an order for some lawful purpose. So unsa man ang elements? Order must have been issued by a superior. The order is for some lawful purpose. Lawful purpose ha. The means used to carry out this order is lawful also. And you have to remember class, the subordinate is not liable. Kung ikaw kitay subordinate ka, ning obey ra gitahay ka sa kanang lawful order sa imuhang superior, unya nakay nabuhat nga sala na tantamount to a crime, pwede kang nga mo claim ani nga obedience ra man ni to a lawful order for some lawful purpose. Present dapat ning tulo ka elements. Pero the subordinate is not liable for carrying out an illegal order of his superior if he is not aware of the illegality of the order and he is not negligent. Class, if you are aware nga illegal ni or not lawful ang purpose sa order sa imuha nga superior class, you cannot claim this. Okay? You cannot claim paragraph 6 as justifying circumstance. Pero, kung dili ka aware nga illegal di ang iyang order, then you can claim this. Okay? So, let's go to exempting circumstance class after a while. Ako ning i-stop sa ni atong recording para nga dili lisod ang uploading sa YouTube. So, I hope you learn from this discussion. Thank you.